Hello world. It looks like it looks like to me like I have sound. It looks like there's also one hellacious delay. So I'm talking and I don't see me saying anything yet. So there's going to be a hellacious delay if it carries on like this for a second. I bet at some point I will move really really fast and then it'll all be gone. Anyway, this is Saturday Night Live Bonsai. We're back. I was trying to frame all of this up despite our little hiccups. I need to be over here, I guess. Like that. It'll be a little better. Frida Reba Darcy is in the house. I am glad to be here. I've got the door to the patio open. It is so nice out here. Uh, Also, notably, a little late start. Even uh, even before I like to get rolling a little bit before now when we used to just run later. But we were a comedy of errors tonight. This delay being one of them. Also, trying to get the microphones to come on was another one, and so that's kind of what's going on. That's kind of what's going on there. I still don't hear me. Well, I don't know that I will. Let's just say this. At some point, if there's no, but I see sound at the bottom, which leads me to think that I should just keep going. Anyway, this is Patricia O'Connor, Frida Reba Darcy, and the Bonsai Balcony Saturday Night Live Bonsai. What you see before you is an 80-year-old Japanese black pine. This is a cork bark black pine. As I understand it, I am its third person. I'm I am its I am its third person. Anyway, this tree is cork bark black pines. They're an anomaly. I've yet to have anybody tell me how this happens, but it's like one in a thousand kind of I don't know. And what we're doing tonight, by the way. Uh, Hello, how are you doing? Bonsai Druid, how are you doing tonight? I just saw you drop the video. We're going to be looking at that next. Uh, what we're doing tonight is we're going to do just a little bit of spring cleanup. Right now, I'm pulling some clover that we've got going on in here, and today was absolutely beautiful, beautiful day out on the balcony. I We went out and shot a video. It'll post later tonight. It'll post later tonight. And you can hear me okay. The sound's okay. It shows here that it's okay, but it was so laggy going in that it took us a little while to get rolling. Anyway, I bought this tree when it was a 75-year-old tree, and it is a Japanese black pine that has had it's Japanese black pine rootstock, as they say, with a grafted cork bark Japanese black pine on top of it. Now the graft is pretty easy to see. Here, show them on the side that's easy to see. You just said that was easy to see. All right. Now it's not easy for me to see, but it looks a lot better at camera. The line is very distinctive. The root base, all of this stuff here that looks really cool trunk is roots. And that was our Japanese black pine. It gives us this really cool, funky, barky, cool, nice looking flaky bark unto itself. And then on top of that, the demarcation zone is right here. So show them again, Pat. It's right here. Boom. This is where 75 years ago, 77 years ago, whatever, somebody somebody grafted. Hi, Lee. Thanks. That's awesome. Uh, and so I bought this tree oh, I bought this tree about 5 years ago, and I love this tree. I consider it to be like, like one of our flagships. But I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn about cork bark black pines. Highly, highly desirable tree, uh, in so many ways. And in so many ways, it is a pain in the butt, uh, especially as an older Japanese black pine. There comes a point and they say these trees reach that point sooner, uh, where you won't do your regular maintenance with this. If you go to decandle this thing every year the way you had been, one year you'll decandle this thing and the tree will take a nosedive, and you're like, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. And if you get away with that, then yeah, you got away with it. From then on, uh, you don't just go and decandle that particular cork bark Japanese black pine every year. You do it every other year, every couple of years. You look at it going in and decide how you think it's going and act accordingly. Uh, yeah. So that's kind of one thing. The other is, even though, and they don't, and I'm not, well, okay, I'm just gonna, they tell me that nobody knows exactly what it is, whether or not they get the sniffles as a seed, or whether or not it happens soon after they break the ground. But the thing is, you missed missing. The thing is, young little pines don't show bark, so I don't really know exactly at what stage of development a cork bark black pine. Do you have to have it for 10 years for that anomaly to show up, and before then it looks like a regular tree? I don't know this, because as it turns out, most of these trees that you see are grafted. Almost all of these trees that you see are grafted. It's rare that you find one on its own rootstock. These guys are very, very finicky, and their rootstock is uh, not known to be the best. I decided at one point that if it was that rare, that I would want one of those. Yeah, that's something I would want to do. I'd want to try to. So when I heard that people were also sometimes like one in a couple of hundred able to root cuttings, so hard to do on pines compared to other trees. They're not known for that. It's like if you're going to go through and decandle uh, a whole table full of trees, there would be Japanese artists. Hi, Paul Kraus, how are you? There would be Japanese bonsai people who would have little tubs set up, and they would, instead of throwing all of those candles away that come candle cutting season, they would throw them in water or something, and then stick them down in fine akadama, and maybe get 10 out of 100 to sprout. I have really good luck with seeds. I don't know that I would go to a lot of trouble to try to get extra pine trees, so much so that I'm going to dedicate the space and the time and the water to 10 out of 10 out of 100, or maybe less. So that's just kind of the but see, now if you were able to get 10 out of 100 and they were these guys, well, that would be profitable, if nothing else. So I was kind of thinking about that and thinking about that. And you would see other people, and I thought, somewhere I'm going to find some guy in Japan who has better luck and I did. I found people here in the United States who have better than average luck propagating from cuttings. And they all some of the systems were pretty elaborate, little little greenhouse things, and taped up to maintain the moisture for long enough to where they would just stay wet long enough to dry up. All kind of little tricks of the trade they were using, but nobody was able to do this with cork bark, and it's because the trees are just so finicky. Watching more people. Oh, by the way, this tree's history. I am its third human in 80 years to take care of it. At one point, Ryan Neal laid his hands upon this thing for a styling. That was told to me when I bought the tree. That was pretty much all that was told to me. I don't I don't know if it was on. I don't know if it was if a student owned the tree and brought it at the time and he picked it up, and but that was, and it was a very, then as now, was a very impressive tree when I first got this guy. Uh, a couple of years ago, and at the time, it took me a minute to figure out just totally what it was. But a couple of years ago, I had been decandling the tree up until then, and I decided to do some work on the balcony. I was going to build a gutter to set the trees in. It was one of those. It was one of our projects. And I figured, excuse me, and I figured I was cleaning house and making dust today and sifting bonsai soil. And anyway, I figured that at some point, uh, it would take me about 4 hours to do this project, and I didn't want to muck around. So I brought a lot of my trees in while I was, they were just sitting out here hanging out, taking life easy for not 4 hours, what ended up just being a couple of hours. And then I ran the trees back out on the balcony when I finished my big project. I was in a real hurry to get everything back in its place. And so I ran the trees back out there and I set the trees down in the drip trays I had going on at the time. And then I went on about my business. And it was a little while later, I started looking at this tree and I was wondering, does it look okay? Does it look all right? Is the color okay? And I even made an appointment to take it for somebody to see it. You know, Valuable lesson here. And they know they have fabulous trees. They were a fabulous person to ask a question like that. And they looked at the tree and went, it looks good to me. And, gave some uh, some good general horticulture advice about something else that I was probably greenest grass on when looking at my tree, as people will tend to do. So, but I remember thinking that as I went from the balcony to the hallway on the way to the elevator, I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, we're underneath some pretty cheesy fluorescent lighting right now, but this tree does not look good. And and I go, well, it's underneath cheesy fluorescent lighting. You don't probably look so good either, Pat. And then I got it over there, and the person kind of gave the tree a look over and said, no, it looks okay. Well, when I got the tree home, I put it back in its place and I watched it, and the color continued continued to go. And I realized, my go-to person doesn't see this tree every day the way I do. And very, very true that they were a lot more, learned than in bonsai terms than I am. Uh, I would always use them. But if you're wondering if your tree looks bad, you're the one on the scene. You're the one that's going to notice that color, and other people might look at your tree and defend that color. And that's kind of what my teacher did. I still hadn't figured out what had gone wrong. Whenever I brought the tree back in, I set it in a different drip tray than the one I took it out of. And then I watered it. The amount of water in that drip tray after I watered it, combined with whatever was in there beforehand, brought the water level up to here. But the drip tray was up to here, so I didn't see that. I didn't see that I'd submerged the bottom of the pot in water for 2 or 3 days before I saw the water in there. And it was a matter of seeing it in the right light because it's just dark down in there. I didn't see the water level until the light hit it, and I was like, "Ooh, gad!" and got the tree out. And then a couple of days after that is when I noticed the tree started looking bad. Not putting this together, not putting this together. And so after all of that, the tree started looking bad. It started looking yellow. It started looking red. I'm going, it's all over for this tree. And you guys have heard me talk before about not believing in emergency repots. It's because what I was learning about, what I was just sucking up. Not, I'm always learning. I will always be a student of bonsai. But whenever I was just power binging bonsai videos, I saw somebody do one of the bonsai masters, one of the guys in England who was always known for his woodwork and carving and stuff, but he was a UK person, and he was saying that most of what we call an emergency repot can be better handled rather than doing something risky like a repot at a time when the tree might not be feeling well. If you could just get a handle on what its needs are and amend your watering, you can get around that emergency repot. So yeah, I'm hanging with that because that still is something that I also go by. I still kind of believe in that. Uh, to the old emergency repot, and I hung tough with uh with that notion until I thought the tree was dead. I went, you have nothing to lose. If this tree is still alive, this is at the very least your last chance to go in there and maybe see what killed it. Maybe not. Who knows? May never know. You know, by this time, by this time, in this much panic, I had already learned about systemic treatments. I had already learned about fertilizing or lack of fertilizing, and I had already found out that you weren't supposed to go yanking around like a leash 75-year-old court bark black pine. So, I'm thinking it could have been any of those things. And I pulled the tree out of the pot. And you know how when you pull a tree out of a pot and it was doing well, you'll have this line of roots down at they grow down at the bottom and they fill that up fast. There was a line above that where that water was, and that was dead roots. And and it wasn't too when I cut that off, I didn't cut off too many roots. I cut off more than I probably would have if I were just doing a repot on the general. But it was just like just kind of like you do, except it was a little bit above that line, and those were all dead, and that completely clogged up any ability for this tree to drain. So the weird thing about it is whenever I cleared that obstruction under the bottom of the pot and I put it back in the pot, I could see what it was that had got it. And before I wired the tree back down, I had remembered that drip tray. And I hadn't remembered that up until then. I was going, those roots died. when you brought the tree in and set it in that drip tray and then watered it, and the drip tray water level was high on this pot. So and that wasn't the weird thing. The weird thing was the recovery was just immediate. I would say within I would say I could see that the tree had stopped dying within 12 hours, and that I could see that within 2 or 3 days that that it was recovering. And I'm like, is this the delayed reaction? Is it going to recover and then still die? You know, but it was very, very obvious to me once I had once I had bit the bullet and done my emergency repot against my better judgment, that that was not only the thing to do, but I got in there and cleared what was going to take this little guy out. So that that was that was 2 years ago, and since then I bought the bullet and I got a couple of younger cork bark Japanese black pines, and I killed them both. Uh, they may not have survived shipping. There was a time when I started trying to get some cool little Japanese black pines off of some of the auctions, and I was just having a hard time getting anything that I had purchased to live a month. Um, it might be that I didn't shade them enough. It might be that they were dead when they got here, and it takes them, you know. But I think if you buy a tree and it comes in the mail over some amount of time, and a month later it's dead, that probably at least played a part, and that was part of the. So, but also I was looking at them and looking at into putting some shape into the limbs that I thought that other people had let go too straight. Well, the other people had learned lessons about that I had let yet to learn, and I hadn't tried to put a lot of motion in this tree, which is why I hadn't broken a lot of branches on this tree. So, whereas a regular a regular pine branch will have a branch that's this big, you know, and it'll have a little bark on it after 10 years. A cork bark will do this thing where it looks like fried Rice Krispies or something. It just gets really, you know, instead of hugging here thick, it gets way out here, just flaky stuff way out here. Now, the other side to that is these guys are these guys are underachievers when it comes to their vascular system. So what you think would be a limb this big for a 4 year old 4 year old Japanese black pine is really something this big that's got this much bark on it. And when you have this tiny of a piece of a vascular system down there in the center of all of this bark, your attempt to put any motion in that will more than likely cause you to break that branch. It is easier to break than the most finicky red pine, or name a pine that will break easy. And it's because it's got all this bark out there that any movement that you try to put in it is exaggerated and working against that tiny little stem that you would think is so much bigger. It's like if you cut one of those off and look at it elongated, you go, wow, that was a dot in the middle of a big piece of bark with a tiny little dot in the center, not not a piece of, you know, not a stem or a limb or a trunk with some bark on it. It was like tiny with some bark on it. And so putting motion in these guys, even when you get the bend you want, it's hard to know whether or not it's going to take a couple of weeks or something to know whether or not, just, you know, just checking to see to know whether or not you got away with that. And you won't always. So they're not so easy to shape, that kind of makes clip and grow pretty good when they probably more of a way to go. Uh, you do want to make sure and use your systemic treatments, and you want to make sure and do your feedings and all that kind of stuff. You want to keep these guys healthy. If I weren't on a balcony when I went through this issue with this tree, I probably would have gone with an Anderson flat or something. I haven't done a show about that in a long time, but going in, I had to explain that we didn't have a space, a sunny space behind the house to hide our pre bonsai projects. That everything that we do is either going to enhance our bonsai garden, even if it's a pre bonsai, or it's going to degrade from our bonsai garden. And so we're going to try to elevate everything as much as we can and have it all bring bonsai joy. Having said that, if I would have had the space or a place in the yard for things that still need full day sun but need a little bit of space to recuperate and stuff, I probably would have done that with this guy. I probably would have done that with this guy. As it was, I just hands off and fed it like nobody's business. Bio gold. I'll take three little lumps of bio gold, and put them in a space about as big as the palm of my hand, and that'll go there. And then since the space that's as big as the palm of my hand, there's about one, two, three, four, five of those. I will literally put about that much bio gold littered across the top of here and water it in. And whenever I go in there and look and do stuff, I see that the mycorrhiza is really good. Oh, when I repotted this thing, doing my emergency repot, I was so freaked out at the time. It was like a funeral for me until I got it up there and go, well, duh. And then when I was going back in it, I looked at it and backed off and looked, and I went, "You forgot to think about the angle." Now I had known to do that a long time. I was just still in shock over losing this tree. I had just totally angle, and not only did I forget to think about it, but I'd done it really badly. I mean, like really bad. And I looked at that and thought, "Well, it's been in there 10 minutes. It's the time to go in there." And I went, "No, no, the tree's already dead. F the angle. If it lives, we'll get to change the angle." And, and so I did. And the tree recovered with that hideous angle. And a year later, I took it out. I took it out of the pot, turned it around, put it in, and put it back at its original angle. And went, but what I did when I took it out and turned it around, I saw great root growth. I saw lots of mycorrhiza. I saw that as soon as we stopped trying to kill the tree and gave it food, that it was basically doing pretty good. And I'd also by that time I had learned that all the motion and stuff that I enjoy putting in Japanese black pines, I probably won't get to do with one of these. Uh, Also, I finally figured out that even if I were to try a thousand cuttings from this tree, see, I've got one. I've got like every year, if I wanted to go through and do those candles again, there's going to be a couple of hundred opportunities to see if I could get one of those to seed. And if it were still the Holy Grail, the tree is regained its vigor and its health for the most part. It's looking pretty good. I just rotated it today, and then I went, oh shucks, rather than just rotate it, I'm going to bring it in, and we'll do tonight's show about that. Before that, I was going to bring in a flat of Japanese black pine. What I'm doing here is I'm going through with my tweezers, and I'm just raking out my third year needles. And I did see a couple of spots that had a couple of clusters of dead needles that I went in with my tweezers, but for the most part, just kind of doing this. Uh, Also listening to people who sounded like they probably had the cork bark, black pine uh, sickness, like I did there for a minute, like I still do. I love these things. But you start thinking about, okay, so it's got holy grail status if you've got one of these on its own roots, that doesn't have that grafted mark. Because whenever you go and you find one of these, it's almost always grafted. I have seen a couple of times when they work, and as much as I was like, yeah, cool, that would be cool to get. What I've later learned to get is there a bigger pain in the butt than this one is, because the roots aren't that strong either. Um, every part of the tree is a pain in the butt to maintain. I've also been told you're very unlikely to find one of these in the wild because that same ratio of 1 in 1,000 would exist out in the wild, sure enough. But that whole thing that I said about bending branches, and having them break on you, that's not something that's going to stand up to the rigors of coastal where Japanese black pines live. So in the wild, this guy wouldn't make it. Uh, I've often heard a story when somebody was talking about Japanese black pines. They mentioned a grower that they knew who was just absolutely in just crazy over cork bark pines. Wanted considered a ponderosa. Oh, by the way, all pines can get whatever it is that makes them a cork bark. All pines can get this. It's that ratio that happens with there's cork bark white pines, cork bark ponderosas, cork bark Scots. They're all out there. But in Japan, they've been collecting and doing these, and there's a dozen different names for species of trees that have thick plating characteristics, but it's still not a cork bark. Uh, you can even, I think, go online, type in cork bark Japanese black pine, and you'll see some cultivars, but they're not this. When they produce bark, they will produce thick bark, thicker than some other species, but they're not these guys. So probably more than you ever wanted to know about cork bark uh, pine. I think it would be kind of cool, I guess, to have a ponderosa cork bark pine. Uh, I haven't had and I haven't had the need or the desire to take any of these cuttings and go seeing about. At first, I thought at some point I would probably by now take candles off this and go to some of our seedlings. We just have all those seedlings. We twist those up and get those kind of pretzels and stuff. But then that kind of defeats the purpose because the cork bark doesn't go back to the part that you haven't cut. You always see that line where it got grafted, and you'll see that forever. Some people do really good jobs of getting that graft way down low and close to the roots, so that can make that line harder to see for sure, for sure. But I'm doing a lot of good here. There weren't a ton of needles laying all over the top of the yeah, now I've got tons of needles laying all over the top of the pot now. I'll just go ahead and tell you my My bio gold came in today. That was good. I also am waiting. I am also waiting on some Boon mix because because we have a repotting coming up on that Ponderosa. I kind of mentioned in the last video that I was very likely going to repot that tree, and I was looking at it, and the overall health right now of the tree looks very good. It's greening right up. It you know it never really seemed to have a problem moving water as long as the temperatures were warm. But I believe it was also some of like in correspondence with Lee of Lee's Trees. Uh, I believe you stated if I have this right, when you repotted your ponderosa, which is from the same source, you were looking at the top soil to try to gauge your moisture, but the roots that were down at the bottom would have been going too dry. Uh, that's quite a bit to think about on there. On one hand, I want to keep all the stored energy that we have in those roots, so I'm not looking to cut anything off. So that kind of made me think, why don't we just rake the edges off there? And then I thought, no, I don't want to do that either because even if I don't cut the mat off the bottom, and I'll make a judgment as to whether I want to do that. But I've got a lot invested in that one scion that's on there, and I want that guy to take off, and I want all the stored energy in those roots. So I'm a little reluctant to go, just thinking ahead to cut anything off. What I'm really keen on is teasing everything out and getting all that bad substrate out of it, not all of it. Never bear root. But anyway, getting a lot of that substrate out of there and replacing it with some good boon mix, which boon mix is a third pumice, a third lava, a third akadama, and it's 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 a good way to go. But whenever it took a little while to get it. It hadn't gotten here yet, but uh, it wasn't that easy to find this time around. My local guy had some for smaller trees. I don't think I could. I was having a hard time finding it in eighth, eighth and quarter size granules. The other side to that was um, I kept finding a lot of stuff that was 5 part or 4 part with bark or wood chips being the fourth ingredient. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. So that's kind of the deal. That's kind of the deal there. So anyway, I've got a couple of gallons. I've got almost 3 gallons. I think that should be enough. If not, I'll run to the store after that. Uh, of food mix coming, and when it gets here, I intend to. So the other thought was that I didn't want to just do the sides because I want to get to the bottom too, uh, and not necessarily cut, but tease, get all that substrate out of it. So the idea is like the show that we watched that I left a link to in my last video, where Ryan Neal does that all important second second potting of a Yamadori ponderosa. So when he did this second repotting on the first one, he basically removed half of the mountain soil and left an area around the outside that was going to go whoo, and occupy with new roots. And then in the next show, and then in the next round, years later, he took chopsticks and removed all the soil from the center, not cutting out the center because that was attached to all the stuff that he was keeping on the outside. So that's kind of an idea and a rule of thumb. But I'm looking at his video, and it occurred to me that tree that he's working on, and Lee and everybody else who's seen that ponderosa outside. If y'all go back and watch this, it's the second repotting of a Yamadori ponderosa. The link is in the last video I shot below. Um, that tree is the same size as our tree. The pot that he put it in is a little bigger than this one 10 years ago. When he cut back the roots enough to where they would fill in this pot after they grew out, they were in a pot just a little bit bigger than this. Probably closer to the size of our cork bark oak pot. So, and that's a big tree for that pot. And what I would be looking at, on the other hand, would be after everything is grown out and after all that stuff is grown out, I don't want to have to go back and have a block of soil this big to have to try to reduce because it's in an enormous training pot. So what I intend to do, and it's going to have to go back in that training pot. I have one smaller pot that might work, but I doubt it. I would not pull that tree out of the pot it's in or waste that pot getting it out, for goodness sakes, and then look at the pot that I have and go, "Ooh, that's not." So what it'll probably be is me taking it out of there and putting it right back in that. But what I intend to do is raise the tree up quite a bit. We've got a root running right along the top, and it's cut right at the edge. I want that to be exposed, and it's going to look like a chopped, clean cut, and we're going to have to live with that. But we were always going to have to live with that until such time is I can do a little bit of carving on it and turn that into a nice feature, which I think it will be. But in the meantime, if I raise the tree up, the root mass can then be more pyramid shaped. Which 4 years from now, when we're done, and that's how long my repot will have gotten us through, uh, I will be able to reduce a pyramid shape down to something and get it inside Also, this will lend itself to a lot of exposed roots. Also, it'll take that root that's running along to the edge there, and it'll bring it above to where we can work with it and carve on it a little and make it look more dramatic, where it can tell a story instead of something that looks like it was saw just where it needed to be to get that nice woody root in there. It could totally lend itself as a nice feature for sure. But oh, all right, I just kind of went through here and raked out a little bit all these spit needles. We still have it like all the other pines. There's a little bit of sun damage, and the sun damage on this guy was directly on the top. I don't know whether or not because that was where the heat was more direct and it couldn't deflect, or whether or not that's heat has risen kind of thing. Pull needles the same direction that they come out of the follicle on. All right, and then uh, oh, just swing that whole limb. So if you can get one of these trees and feed it and love it and take care of it and stuff and enjoy that about it, then yeah, these guys can be tricky to wire. They can be tricky to maintain. They're a little bit more susceptible to disease. They're a little bit more susceptible to age. But this guy, this guy has been my pride and joy, but it's been somebody's pride and joy for about 80 years. So so there's that. Uh, all right. So that's got that. I just watered it before I brought it in. Uh, so I'm not going to sweep this off right now. It's wet. When I get it outside and the top of the substrate dries, I'll probably take my vacuum cleaner and turn the nozzle around and give that a little, kind of like you do after after you do after you get a haircut. Uh, this is my oily T-shirt, and this is I use several different oils. I use different oils for different things. Different different oils for different things. When it comes time to clean my tools, I do that with this my oily rag T-shirt, and make sure that lid's on there, Pat. And I do that with this. Uh, this is a says extra virgin, but we're not slut shaming anybody here. It doesn't have to be the good stuff. I've had that. I've had that bottle for going on for a couple of years. So I wipe down and clean my tools with that. It's food grade. That being the idea. I don't know what part of the baby Johnson's baby oil comes from. So I don't know if it's food grade. But I do know that according to the guys at Bonsai Q, uh, they use this same stuff, except you can recognize one Johnson on there, and then a bunch Mandarin. So yeah, Johnson's Johnson's oil of bebe, and that will give this guy a little wipe down before we send it back out. All of the it's time. It's if all of my little pines and all of my trees are waking up, they're all taking in more water and stuff. So this is if you got black pines and it's spring where you are, start feeding until it gets until you're 30 days from when you're going to cut candles if you're the kind of person who would do such a thing. So that was kind of going, oh, we're out of bottle gold, and it's feeding time. We're out of bottle gold, but that came in really quick. I ordered my bio gold from uh, Jonas at Bonsai tonight. Uh, Good price on the bio gold, and that is a mom and pop operation. So yeah, yes, yes, indeed. That's looking. Can you see that's looking a lot better, huh? Also, if I had, I don't see a lot on this. It just looks dusty mostly. Um, if I saw calcium stains on here, I have had I have had good luck with walnuts. Take a rag like so, and a fistful of walnuts, and just pound those puppies into butter. Don't go pounding any puppies into butter, but just pound those walnuts into butter, and and people will go, well, all kind of nuts would probably do that. It has to do with what turns rancid and what doesn't, and what lasts later and doesn't. Peanut oil I didn't have. Is when somebody said any oil will do that, I went back and went, okay, let's see, because I was told walnuts were good for that, and I tried it and it worked. And whenever I passed that along, the feedback that I got was most nuts would do just exactly what you said. So I'm always feeding our local crows. You didn't, if you tell the landlord that, I'll deny it. But I'm always feeding the local crows peanuts. So I was like, okay, we'll see how that works. And goes on, looks the same, dries out, and then it doesn't, and then you still see it didn't really remove it. It just made it wet looking for a little while, and then that dried out. This actually, I think, breaks it down or something. I don't see it afterwards. And this is the pot that this tree came with when I got it. Get those little feet up where you can. Okay. I have a line. I have a scratch on it over here on this side. Part of my bamboo water tray. It's the the wooden part ran right along there, kind of like a catch fence or something, and it left a mark on there where it was. Oh, okay. Anyway, a little bit, just a little bit of cleanup. I want to not while it's in my living room, but I'll take a little fan. We'll take a little fan to that and give that a little blowout. And and that's our 75-year-old Japanese cork bark black pine ready to go back out and take its rightful place in the sun. Uh, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you. Frida appreciates you. And our next drop will be tomorrow, mañana. When what are we gonna do tomorrow? Uh, I don't know what we're gonna do tomorrow. I think it's gonna be a nice day. We'll probably go out there and flaunt that flaunt that somehow. Yeah. Thanks for having us, guys, and thank you all so much for watching. And this is our 80-year-old, going on 80-year-old now. I think this is Jonas. If you're out there somewhere, is your oak tree 80 years old now? Uh, Japanese cork bark black pine, and our little spring cleanup. Good night.